Anger is a complex emotion. It can scare people. It's often frowned upon. There are, for example, spiritual communities that often look down upon anger as a lesser emotion. And if we express anger in an aggressive and totally unchecked way, then it can cause harm in our relationships. But if we don't honor the anger that arises on us when we experience some kind of injustice and we repress it or we turn away from it, or we don't know how to properly channel that anger into appropriate action that honors our own needs, then we lose access to the vital energy of anger that allows us to stand up for ourselves. And if we don't have that, then we're going to have weak boundaries, and we end up tolerating situations that are unacceptable to us, that if we had access to the energy of anger and could channel it in a healthy way, we could find the strength to stand up against. I'm Trevor Youngquist, and I'm a licensed mental health counselor, and in this video we're going to be talking about how to tap into the vital protective energy of anger and use that to stand up for ourselves and set healthy boundaries. And we're going to differentiate that from expressing anger in an aggressive way that could cause harm to our relationships and that we might later regret. So let's start by looking at anger from the perspective of evolutionary psychology. Anger is a core inbuilt emotion that evolved over hundreds of thousands of years because it played a vital role in helping us survive. The purpose of anger, evolutionarily speaking, is to give us the fiery energy to stand up for ourselves or those we care about when something unfair, unacceptable, or threatening has happened. In a physically dangerous situation where we feel threatened, anger can give us the energy and the nervous system activation and the aggression needed to defend ourselves and go on the attack if our lives are physically threatened, which obviously plays a vital role in helping us survive. It gives us the energy to be aggressive, to be intimidating, and that sort of thing when we experience a threat. But in less life or death situations, anger gives us the energy we need to set boundaries in our lives or stand up to behavior and treatment from others that we find unacceptable. Anger can also give us the emotional strength to enforce our boundaries when they've been crossed, even if that might be very uncomfortable on some level. So let's talk about some examples. Let's say that you have a romantic partner who has been very aggressive or yelled or done something that you've previously agreed was unacceptable, and it's happened again. Then anger will arise in you and it will give you the energy to enforce the boundaries that you've previously set. And obviously that can be hard because this is someone you might be attached to and it might be scary or uncomfortable to enforce that boundary, but anger will give you the power to do so. This could be temporarily walking away from the interaction, or in more severe cases of a unacceptable behavior, it could even be leaving the relationship. As another example, let's say you live with roommates and one of your roommates is doing something that you find disrespectful or irritating or otherwise less than ideal, and you notice some anger arising in you. Then that anger is signaling to you that you should have a polite conversation about your preferences and speak up about your needs in this situation, so you don't have to feel burdened by this behavior or like you're putting up with something that you really don't want to be putting up with. So we can see here that having anger doesn't mean you need to unleash it in an uncontrolled or aggressive way, but it's signaling to you that something is not right here, and I need to do something. I need to take some kind of action in order to right this situation, even if that's uncomfortable. But I can do that in a diplomatic way that will not damage a relationship or scare someone else. And that's where the power of anger can really come into play in a positive way. And critically, anger compels us to take some kind of action to right the situation. It's not enough to just feel angry. We need to do something with that anger. Anger compels action. As another example, let's say you have a family member who is continually bringing up something that you've already said to them that you're not going to talk about. Maybe it's about politics or religion, which you've just realized is unproductive and only causes stress, and you've just agreed that you're not going to go there with this person. but they keep doing it anyways. That could evoke a sense of anger. Or maybe they are continually expressing their preferences and ideas about how you should be living your life, and you've said to them before that this is not acceptable to me, I'm not going to put up with this. Then in that case, the rising of anger in a healthy way, you're not necessarily blowing up on this person, but it's saying that you need to have some boundaries and you need to be able to walk away from that situation. And walking away, just straight up walking away from a situation with a family member like that, can be a great way to enforce a boundary and correct their behavior. Because if you walk away, that's such a powerful form of disengagement that they're less likely to perpetuate that behavior in the future. I'm talking about walking away from an interaction or leaving as opposed to completely cutting off a family relationship. But if someone is continually acting in a pathological or abusive way, and they show over time that they're unwilling or unable to change, and it's causing you a lot of harm, then that's a situation where considering cutoff could be appropriate. So the emotional energy of anger helps us stand up for ourselves and those we care about when something unacceptable has happened. And this also applies to broader injustices in the world, whether related to social issues or conflicts or climate change. We can feel anger on a collective level, and that anger is signaling to us that we feel that something is not acceptable more globally, and it can inspire us to do some kind of action to play our part in trying to move in the direction of change. So I want to talk about a formula now for tapping into the healthy adaptive power of anger to protect us, so we can stand up for ourselves and have the energy to do uncomfortable things like setting boundaries or enforcing boundaries or taking some kind of protective action, even when that in normal circumstances might be quite uncomfortable for us. And this set of steps allows us to access the protective functions of anger without expressing it in a way that could be damaging to our relationships. So the first step is to just recognize when we're experiencing anger and feel into the anger. We need to be able to feel the anger in order to have the energy to take some kind of action to change the situation and meet some need that we have. After becoming aware of the anger and feeling its energy, we regulate the anger and regulate the aggressive impulses that might go along with it. And often a great way to do this is just to step away from a triggering situation for a moment, so you can collect yourself and feel into the anger and respond in a thoughtful way to the situation. Maybe we step away and just become mindful of the feelings and just breathe into them and just allow ourselves to settle a little bit. We could regulate the emotion through making our exhales a bit longer than our inhales is another way. Or just taking a little time to cool off. That can also help to regulate the feeling in the moment. Third, once the raw emotional charge of the anger is a bit more regulated, we can get in touch with the feeling of anger in our body, and with a bit of mindfulness, we can learn what that anger needs from us, what it needs us to do in order to honor our own needs and protect ourselves. One way we can do this is by focusing on the feeling of anger in our body. And let's say we're in a situation where we're not quite sure what exactly is making us angry, then focusing on that feeling in our body and then just asking that energy of anger in our body, what is this anger about? And you'd be surprised about how much that can help give access to an intuitive sense of the situation or the condition that's going on that's causing you to feel this anger. But if you do know the cause of the anger, then another great question to ask, the somatic energy of anger in your body, just the feelings, maybe it's just like a tension or a tightness or a fire in your core, a tightness in your chest, a clenching of your fists, a furrowing of your brow, just feeling into the bodily presence of anger. You can ask it, what do you need me to do? What do you need me to do? What action do you need me to take in order to right this situation? And again, you'd be surprised about the intuitive power of what the raw emotion of anger can tell you about what you need to do to resolve it. And once you do have a sense of what you need to do, it's so powerful to give yourself and that part of you that's feeling so angry the reassurance that you will take the action. And when you do that, you might notice an immediate calming of the anger, because the anger is being honored and there's an agreement you've made with yourself that you will take the action that the anger is compelling you to take. Of course, for the sense of relief that comes along with that reassurance to be long-term, you actually have to follow through with the action. So that's another critical step. You need to not just understand what the action is that you need to do, but you need to follow through with the action. You need to set the boundary. You need to stand up for yourself. You need to express your preference, even if it's really uncomfortable. And that is the way that the anger can be completed. The adaptive function of the anger has been served once you complete the action that the anger is saying you need to take in order to honor your own needs. So a few final notes about anger. Sometimes when anger arises, especially if it's in response to a injustice in the world or to a hurt that's been inflicted in a relationship, there can be a lot of sadness not that far under the surface of the anger. There can be a lot of grief there because we might feel really hurt, or we might feel a real devastating sense of loss about what might be going on in the world or what might be happening in our relationship. And the anger, of course, is there to protect us, but it's also important to be curious if there is a sense of sadness or grief that's underneath the anger. And once we are able to process the anger and set some boundaries or take action to protect ourselves or stand up for ourselves, then it's really important to tend to the sadness or the grief. The sadness is often just a tender part of ourselves that needs some kind of care, either from ourselves, treating ourselves with compassion and understanding and validation, or through co-regulating that sadness by expressing it, disclosing it to safe others who can help support us and care for us as we process the sadness we might be holding. It's also possible that at times we might experience a sense of anger that's out of proportion to the present situation we're in. That often happens when we experience some kind of real injustice or mistreatment earlier in our lives when we couldn't fully stand up for ourselves. It wasn't safe to express anger, but we internalized this sort of repressed anger that couldn't come out and complete in the moment when we were, helpless children or dependent on the people who may have been inflicting the injustice. So we can have this sort of bottled up sense of anger that was never able to express itself and complete. And so it can linger under the surface for years and decades into our adulthood, and can come out in great force when we experience some kind of situation that reminds us of similar injustices that we experienced earlier in life. Even if your anger at a present moment situation is in part amplified by previous traumas where anger wasn't able to fully be expressed and resolved, it's still very useful to go through the steps of recognizing and regulating the anger, and then listening to what the anger needs from you, and then taking that action. That's still a valid set of steps to go through. But if it feels like the anger continues to be out of proportion to events and it's causing some acute distress in your life, or in some way causing trouble for you, then it's definitely worth working with a therapist to process the original wound that's giving rise to this amplified sense of anger and hopefully bring some resolution to it. So in summary, when we relate to our anger in a healthy and open way without blindly and impulsively expressing it, then we can tap into it to set boundaries, stand up for ourselves, and protect ourselves and those we care about when we need to do so, even if it would normally be uncomfortable to take that kind of action. So again, the formula is to recognize the anger, regulate it, inquire into the need, and then take the adaptive action to meet that need. Thank you for watching this video. If you found it useful, please like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.